Hello, YouTube. I'm out here in the yard working on cars, my cars. I ordered this new center section for the 9-inch Mack car, and I'm fitting to put a chunk in it. I ordered a new chunk from Quick Performance. Changing the gear ratio, center section in it was making a lot of noise, and it's not the center section fault. I had a brake caliper freeze up on it, and I didn't know it, and I kept driving it. And it messed up the gears in it, so it's making a whole bunch of noise. But anyway, I wanted to get to the Mack, and I just read a comment on the guy was saying that the Mack Pinnacle was not as good as the Anthem. So my dad used to tell me, said, son, I was, young, 17 years old. He said, son, I done forgotten more stuff than you'll ever know. And that comes from life experiences. So I just want to bring some knowledge to some of the newer drivers or people that's in trucking. Let me explain something to you. These trucks are diesel engines, so they're designed to run long miles. But even at that, there's certain things that they got to have to stay functioning properly. Now, I purchased a 2015 Mack Pinnacle for my wife. She drives it, and it had 450,000 miles on it. It's at the job now. But here's the thing. When I got the truck, bought it from the dealership, it came from Service Transport, and companies and people don't give a diesel engine what's required. Now, when I bought this truck, brand spanking new, the first thing I had done was, they recommend you get the alignment done at around 15,000 miles. I had that done. At around 200,000 miles, I had the overhead ran on this truck. This truck doesn't ask for a regen. It does it once every blue moon, but it's probably time now because it's got 329,000 miles on it, 330,000 miles on it. Right now it does. So at 200,000, I had the overhead ran. Now, what is overhead? Overhead is when you have them go in and they adjust the valves. If you get a brand new truck, it breaks in the motor. Well, it also breaks in the drivetrain, the camshaft. All that stuff is out of whack around 100,000 miles or 200,000 miles. You got to get the valves readjusted for the wear. If you don't, it'll start oil consumption, poor fuel mileage, all these things. Most companies don't even bother with that. It costs about $400 to get it done. But what you are doing is you're making sure your combustion is being used. In other words, if the valves and the valves are not opening and closing at the right time, you'll have exhaust and oil seeping past the valves, getting into your filters for your exhaust filter, your DEF system. So it's detrimental that you keep your truck service, and some people don't even know what an overhead is. The guy at the Mack place told us I bought the Pinnacle, 450,000 miles on it, and I went in there, and after about a week of running it, it was asking for a regen every 200 miles. It's wanting a regen every 200 miles. So after I made a few dollars with it, I took it back to the Mack place, and I said, look, I need you to run a regen on it. They said, run an overhead on it and service it, but run an overhead. And I forgot something else I had done. I can't remember what it was. But anyway, my main concern was getting the overhead run because I had a check engine light on. That's what it was. I had a check engine light on, and they said that the system hadn't been updated. The software hadn't been updated in the computer since it was new. So I told him, update the software, and while you got it, run an overhead. The guy said, man, we don't get people that ask for overheads. Once they ran the overhead on that truck, it hadn't asked for a regen since. So people that own their own trucks, even company drivers, if you're listening, when your truck gets 100, 200,000 miles, somewhere in there, and it goes asking for a regen, a Mack or a Volvo. I can't speak for a lot of other trucks, but I had an overhead run on that truck. You get an overhead ran on it. That's detrimental because it does what it does. It makes sure the valves are opening and closing it like they're supposed to. If not, you're blowing fuel out the exhaust. You're blowing oil out the exhaust, and that clogs up your filters in your exhaust. So, a overhead is detrimental if you own your own truck. Now, I had this truck, the overhead ran on it in about 200,000 miles. It's at 320. Between 450 and 500,000 miles on this truck, I'm going to have the overhead ran again. You know, I can listen to an engine and tell when it hasn't had an overhead run because it's noisy. You know, when you go to put pressure on it, when you go to pull off, it'll make, you can hear the valves and you know, it's growling. That means that the valves are way out of adjustment and it needs an overhead. So just a little bit of advice on trucks. I brought this truck home just to do a little service on it. It's still running great. I got my hose rack on the back and I need to tighten it up. I had a guy make me one for the hose rack on here, and it's leaning, and I can tell it's coming. It's loose. So I'm gonna take and have it. I'm gonna take it off and tighten it up, or maybe find some grade A bolts and put a little more pressure on. But just remember, you need to run an overhead on any diesel engine that's not self-adjusting at least every 250,000 miles. Overhead. That's when you take it to the dealership and you say, hey man, run me an overhead on it. What it costs to run overhead? Some people charge $400, some people charge more. But the Mack dealership in North Augusta, South Carolina, they charged me might have been more, $450. I think for that Pinnacle they charged me might have been $1,000. But basically what they do, they take the valve covers off and they adjust all the valves, exhaust valves, intake valves. They adjust the jake brake valves. See, when you feel your jake brake not strong, you know, when you throw your jake brake on, it's supposed to slow this truck down. That's a good indication that your overhead is in need of running, because your jake brake is a compression valve. And if you throw your jake brakes on in your truck and they ain't strong as they used to be, that's an indication that your truck needs an overhead ran on it. So I just wanted to give you guys a heads up. There's a lot of things about diesel trucks that I done forgot. And that's one of them. The second thing is water treatment. When you have your truck serviced at a Mack dealership, they change the water filter. There's a filter on your water pumper down there in that area. That filter has a certain mineral in it that goes into the water system. And what that does is it cut down on corrosion. But another thing it does, which is very important, is it cuts down on pinging. People don't know what pinging is. Pinging is if that water treatment is not in that, if that filter is not changed, it's got a rock in it or mineral of some sort. But what it does is it lets the cylinders cool evenly from top to bottom. That allows and stops the piston from pecking a hole in your cylinder walls. That's another thing that a lot of people don't realize. So when you have your truck serviced, you don't change your cooling system. Your water, it's called your water filter. What it does, it treats the water with a mineral, because your engine is so large, you know, your cylinders might cool from top to bottom unevenly. And what that mineral does is it makes sure that the cylinder contracts and expand evenly. Because if you don't, you got the cylinder too small at the bottom and it's too wide at the top, and your piston will slap and it'll rock in the cylinder, which will cause the piston to peck a hole in your cylinder wall. These are things I learned back when my brother was driving trucks and my daddy was driving trucks. So diesel engine got certain things you need to look up and learn. Number one, run your overhead. Definitely run your overhead, because the overhead determines your combustion cylinder. Your truck's going to pick up power because it's using the exhaust right, and the valves are opening and closing correctly, and it's gonna save from dirty air coming out of your exhaust, which fills up your filters in your exhaust system. So run your overhead around 250,000 miles every 250,000 miles. Like I said, I ordered this truck. I've been driving since it had 12 miles when I picked it up. And at 250, I had overhead ran on it. Now it's got about 320 on it. When it gets around 450, 500,000 miles, I'm going to run the overhead again. So remember, run your overhead and get that fuel, that water system filter changed. If you know, it don't take nothing to change. You can change it yourself. So water system filter and run your overhead. It's just something that I thought about that maybe a lot of people don't know about. The companies you buy them from, if you get one off the lot, they ain't done that. They ain't run no overhead on this truck. You can almost bet that. So you can ask the dealership when you take it to them, hey, this truck ever had an overhead run on it? Nope, never have. So overhead is detrimental. All right, thank you guys.